This is the Real Estate Investing Abundance Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. I know you're excited to get into today's show, but I have a very exciting announcement to share with you before moving to the show. We've just launched a complimentary and comprehensive webinar that, among other things, shows you how to legally use passive real estate investing to reduce your taxes, recession-proof your nest egg, and take the sting out of inflation. If you are curious to learn more, go to stevetucker.com/webinar. It is complimentary and only takes a couple of minutes of your time. Once again, that is stevetucker.com/webinar. I'll see you in the webinar. Enjoy today's show. Hello, enlightened investors, and welcome back to Real Estate Investing Abundance. I'm your host, Dr. Allen Lomax, and delighted to be back with you again today. And we're going to take a look at a very interesting story of one person's journey from $2,500 to $50K per month in a 2-year period of time. Joey Muré is the co-founder and partner at Wealth Without Wall Street, an online community that seeks to re-educate business owners and families on how money truly works. Wealth Without Wall Street exists to help people who want to become financially free without ever having to invest through Wall Street or becoming debt-free. So an interesting story we're going to look at today. So Joy, take us into the show and share one of your memorable experiences that helped you to be who you are today.
Alan, so glad to be here. This is going to be a great time because I know I'm in the same place as people who are like-minded. And I'll say this, abundance is the key word in your podcast that attracted me to be a part of it, because when I was growing up, my parents actually worked for the Salvation Army. And if you know that organization, it's all about giving. It's about sharing with others who are in different positions in life and sometimes it's just a seasonal thing or it's a temporary thing. But I got the opportunity with that organization to serve in a lot of different capacities. Some would be and when I was in high school, I was out helping my parents with ringing bells at Christmas. If you ever see the little red pots out in front of stores, I would volunteer time for that. And I was a part of their, what's it called? The bands that they have at different events and things. I played in those bands. But one of those opportunities took me overseas to Zimbabwe, Africa, right after I graduated high school. And from the standpoint of abundance, probably one of the most impactful things that I got to experience was a 6-week trip around the country of Zimbabwe. We would go from city to city, little townships in the country, and we were constantly hosted by families in these little villages. And what really impacted me the most was, from an abundance mindset, is these folks would bring us into their homes that were very, very dilapidated. I mean, there was nothing much there, but they would clean it. They would make sure it was prepared like we were royalty. They would prepare food that was considered like very difficult for them to get their hands on, like chicken and like green vegetables and things that just weren't always readily available. But they rolled out the greatest meal that they could provide to us. And on several occasions, I would walk to the backside of their little huts or their homes, and they would be, after they had fed us, they would be sitting around a cauldron on a fire and eating this very basic food they called sadza. It's almost like a grits or a cornmeal kind of material, very inexpensive. It was like the most common thing that they had, along with maybe some collard green type things. That was their whole meal. And they had just given us their delicacies.
Wow.
And I don't know about you, but for me as an 18-year-old, that was very impactful to me because they were abundant with what they had, and even though they had so little. And I think that it kind of drives me to think, how can I provide impact and abundance to those around me. So anyway, that's a long story, but that's kind of one of the things that really helped me in my formative years.
Wow. Wonderful experience, very humbling experience as well. We oftentimes hear that some of the poorest people are the most generous, and we see that time and time again in so many different ways.
We have a lot to learn from them in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we absolutely do. Well, you have this definition of a DNA, an investor DNA. So, why should we invest, or why should we know what our DNA is before we invest?
Such a great question. And I think, to be honest, when people hear the name Wealth Without Wall Street, one of the most immediate questions they ask us is, if it's not on Wall Street, what do you invest in? Like, they want to jump straight to the investment itself and say, oh, it must be, something really interesting and cool. And how can I get involved and whatever? And it's one of those things where I want to kind of stiff arm and say, wait a minute, it's not ultimately about the investment. It's about the investor, right? Robert Kiyosaki is actually mentioned as coining this phrase that there's no good or bad investments, only good or bad investors. And I take it one step further and say, how God created you to see the world and how he gave you perspectives and experiences and those sort of things, they shape who you are as an investor. And so you can either invest congruently with those things, or you can invest like against that. And I'll give you an example. My business partner, Russ, 2007, he got introduced to an opportunity to invest in a flip property in his college town that he grew, he went to college in. And his friend was like, oh man, this is great. I'm going to give it to you as a discount. These things are getting flipped for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 more than what you're buying it for today. And he's like, okay, well, that sounds good. And he said, but you just have to sit on it, for 6 months to a year, rent it, so on and so forth. So he starts renting the property. And then of course, what happens? 2008 hits. He's making a whopping $97 a month in cash flow. It is boring as sin. Like he cannot think of anything more boring, because he is all about influence, and he's all about how can I kind of have some sort of advisory role. Like I want to create some way to push the ball forward with momentum and whatever I'm doing. And you just can't do that. You have a management company in place. Somebody's making a rent payment. It's paying the mortgage. It's just boring. Well, he went almost 10 years after that, finally was able to sell it. But in the meantime, he kind of equated that with investing, and he just didn't do a whole lot. And we liken that to the idea that, man, if he had known that there was all these other things he could have invested in that were like aligned with who he is, he would have done a lot more, a lot sooner. And so what's the time frame that he lost from not being aligned? It was a major cost to him. And that's what I would tell anybody that's listening right now is, what are you investing in? Do you align with that in investment, or are you just chasing rate of return or just the tax benefit of whatever you're investing in? Those things are great. But if the actual investment itself is not something that you're passionate about, knowledgeable in, feel like really you can directly kind of see yourself alongside that investment, the chances are it could have adverse effects to your investing journey and or your ability to get to financial freedom as fast as possible. And that's really our heart in this, is we want to align people with the things that will get them there as fast as possible. And when you invest alongside your investor DNA and not against it, those things happen much, much more quickly.
Well, in psychology, there is the ongoing argument of nature versus nurture. And what I hear you saying is that our investment DNA is actually nature, that we come into the world with a certain DNA and a certain disposition to be a certain type of investor. So this is very interesting to me. I mean, I'm sure it's not totally nature, because in almost all aspects, from personality to anything else you want to talk about, there is a component of nurture as well as the nature there. But I think that you're really onto something here, that there probably is something within our DNA that is going to predispose us to certain kinds of things that are going to bring us more fulfillment than other kinds of things do. So help us here, Joy, to understand how it is that we can actually get in touch with that core aspect of who we actually are.
Well, I would say, first of all, you take a personal kind of inventory. What sort of things interest me? Do I get excited about doing due diligence and detail? I'm very detail oriented. Do I like, or do I like really shy away from those sort of things? And I want to be more kind of front and center, more involved. And, passive income is a funny thing because it's not uninvolved. Passive income is actually very involved at certain aspects and certain timeframes in the deal. And in the case of due diligence, everybody should be involved, right? At some level, or have hired somebody that's really good at that. But I think there's other people, like I mentioned, my business partner, Russ, he wants to have an ongoing kind of pulse on whatever he's investing in. So he loves small business. He loves, we had a short-term rental business that we just recently sold, but he loved being in a position where we had a full-time operator, but he wanted to constantly have a weekly kind of meeting to just go over what's going on, what's the initiatives that we're working on, how can I maybe go out to social media and push certain, things out to the world that could potentially drive people to this business. He loves that sort of stuff. Other people would say, I don't want anything to do with that. If I was forced to go out and put something on social media in order to help build the business, I would never want to do that. I want to be more in the shadows. I want to be more just capital intensive. And, so those things, that's taking a personal inventory is huge. Part of that is we actually developed the investor DNA profile with the people at DISC. If you know the DISC profile assessment, we partnered with their group to create this. And you can actually take that investor DNA profile. In our community, we sell a course that specifically gives you access to that, along with 10 of our top passive income ideas in a matrix that you can say, okay, this is my type, this is the way I see the world, this is how I'll see these passive income options, from pros, cons, and the resources necessary to be successful in each one. And it just really helps people to kind of put a filter or a strain through and say, oh, these are the 10, maybe these 2 are the ones I could start with and start doing more due diligence with.
I've heard of DISC, but I have never worked with it. But I'm assuming it's a personality type indicator. Is that correct?
Yes. It is.
And I sort of had the impression, I don't know if this is true or not, but I thought that it was kind of based upon the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, or at least there was some relationship between the two. I don't know if that's correct or not.
The fact that they are both personality profiles would definitely have some overlap. How they directly coordinate or correlate, I'm not certain. They would technically be 2 separate ways to validate personality profiles.
So how many types are there actually in the DISC profiles?
Well, so the DISC has 4 main categories. It would be kind of like the thing that would drive from a primary trait, if you will. So a D would be a driver, more of a somebody who wants to be in control and in charge. And I is somebody that wants to be more of an influence and be more kind of center of attention. Like they're okay to be the really socialite type personality. S would be more of a loyal and steady kind of personality type. And then C would be a more detailed and more kind of analytical type. And so those would be the primary things. But what you find is you'll have any various combinations. So you might have somebody that's a DC or somebody that's an SI. I'm an SI, so I'm loyal and steady, and I don't like a whole lot of conflict. I don't want to be kind of veering out of known things. But the I part of me wants to be personable and meet new people and connect and those sort of things. You try to put me in a position where I have to be super analytical like a C, and I'm going to push back on that because I just really don't feel like I have the capacity to focus for a long period of time on one specific thing. And so I'm an SI, but you might have somebody who is, like I said, there's other combinations that would make this. I don't know the number of total ways that it could be played out, but we're pretty complex beings. God didn't make it like little robotic little compartmentals people. So it can get complex.
Enlightened investors, if you haven't done so already, be sure and click that like button and also click that share so others can take advantage of the content. And finally, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our upcoming episodes. Yeah, personality is extraordinarily complex aspect of our human beings here. So you being an IS, what does an IS like in terms of investing?
Well, I'm actually the opposite. I'm the SI.
The SI, I'm sorry.
And the S is my more dominant, which means I love things like private lending. Private lending is one of those things that I can put money in one time. It's very hands-off and it's very consistent, cash flow monthly. It's easily trackable. And it also is something that is backed by some sort of collateral. So it gives you that kind of security. Another way to think of S is security. And so I love things that are very much backed by multiple things. One of the things we do is land flipping. And so what we do is we have a group that operates for us. They buy property from existing sellers who are kind of in a position where they don't really want the land anymore. They maybe have inherited it or they bought it years ago. Now they're out of state from that place. They've moved on, but they still have this land. So they have to keep paying taxes. In some cases, they've already, kind of defaulted on their taxes. And so we know that they're interested in getting rid of it. They go and they offer them 25, 30 cents on the dollar. They sell the property to our group. Our group goes out then and markets to the retail buyers on terms, owner financing. And so as an example, maybe I can buy a piece of property for $2,500 that I turn around and sell for $10,000 on note income. And maybe it's, I don't know the number right off the top of my head, but let's say it was like $1,000 down and $300 a month for 30 months. That's what the income we would get from that particular sale. And we do that over and over and over. I love that for various reasons. Why? Because it's lending. It's backed by real assets like hard land. I can go out and put my hands on it. And there's really no other variables, like there's no termites, there's no toilets, there's no tenants to deal with, not a whole lot of conflict at play. And yet it's very profitable. Some cases, 300 to 1,000% returns can be realized over time. And we've built that business over the last 3 years now to over $26,000 a month in recurring note income. That's a really, so those are the kinds of things an S would really gravitate towards.
Well, very fascinating. Joy, tell us what you have to offer our audience and how it is they can get in touch with you to take advantage of that.
Well, sure. So what we always like to do is just create a place that is tagged along with your current podcast. And so if people want to go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/real estate investing abundance, I know that's a long name, but it'll be easy to remember because of the name of the podcast. If you go there, you can engage with us by joining our community. You can, and which is free. You can get on a 15-minute call with one of our coaches to talk about your investor DNA, and they can give you access to that course. I forget the cost of it, but they can give you the links to where you can go and purchase that. Or you could even join one of our masterminds or apply to join one of our masterminds on that page. So happy to engage with people and help them along their journey. Ultimately, we don't exist for any other reason than to say, hey, we're one beggar trying to tell the other beggar where to find the bread. And that bread is creating financial freedom for you and your family as fast as possible. And so we want to walk you through that process. Wherever you're at in that the stages to get there, we have something that we can help you to get there faster.
Joey, you say that debt freedom does not equal financial freedom. Explain that to us.
Great question. I think if you really zoom out and you think about what is financial freedom, isn't it ultimately that I get to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, wherever that is? So location freedom, not having to be tied down to a specific location because I have to be there, not going to 40 to 50 to 60 hours of my week is already dictated to me because someone else I'm trading my time for their money at their job. Those are the things. So if we zoom out, we define financial freedom as those things, then really there has to be some sort of income coming in that covers my monthly expenses so that I don't have to go to work. I don't have to trade my time for that money to cover my expenses. And so we just borrow Robert Kiyosaki's very simple formula. Passive income greater than monthly expenses is financial freedom. Well, what we've always been told, though, is, okay, if you're making money, what's the first thing you need? You need to get rid of debt, right? If I pay off debt, then I'll be free and I can do what I want. But is that really true? Because monthly expenses are more than just debt payments. Have you thought about somebody who is fully retired? They've been living on a quote unquote fixed income, and yet they feel like they don't have a lot of freedom. Because why? Because you can't pay off the cost of living. And by the way, in the last 3 years, have we seen the cost of living go up at all?
Absolutely.
Your water bill, your power bill, the food that you're eating is tripled, in my opinion, in the last 3 years. Those things, transportation. Yeah. Everything has gone up in terms of that monthly expense. So if I pay off all my debt, I still have to have some income to cover those other things. Cost of medical assistance, right? Insurances, all those things have gone up. So the only true way to do this is you've got to create passive income by some form of income that does not require my presence, that then covers those monthly expenses. And if we've had multiple case studies of this. We've had dentists and doctors that had these massive student loans. And guess what? They think, oh my gosh, if as soon as I can pay off these student loans, I'll be free. And then they look up and they realize, man, I've poured all this capital towards something that just reduced my monthly expenses. That's great. But what if I had taken all that excess money that I used to pay down and pay off the debt, and I would have put it into assets that created passive income? Was it land flipping? Was it short-term rentals? Was it investing with great operators who can create a return that more than exceeds what the debt cost me? In that case, we've had people that just shook their heads, dentists in particular. I'm just thinking of one specifically that we talked to. And he's just shaking his head. He's like, man, I have wasted a lot of money going down the wrong side of this equation. If I had taken that money, I could have been financially free by now, because the monthly expenses include the debt. And if I can exceed that with my passive income, my time is now my own. It's not somebody else's. And that's the ultimate goal. So that's why we focus in on financial freedom is way more important than debt freedom.
Sounds like wonderful advice. So many things that we could talk about here, but let's take a look here at a lot of people think that the 401ks and IRAs are the cat's meow. You don't have that particular perspective on that. So tell us about that.
Well, it's all related to what we're just talking about, isn't it? If I have money that I can deploy to get towards this passive income greater than monthly expenses formula, what do I want to do that today, or do I want to put that off until I'm in my 60s? Right? I don't know how old you are as you're listening to this, but if you're in your 30s or 40s, if you're any time before you're in your 60s, by putting money into 401ks and IRAs, you are purposely going against your main objective of becoming financially free. And people say, well, Joey, isn't it stupid for me not to put money in my 401k because my company's matching it? Like, that's free money. You hear all this stuff. It's free money. It's 100% return. It's blah, 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 all these things. And what I would tell you is, if you get really just dialed in on passive income greater than monthly expenses, all of those things don't matter. If I have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in a 401k and I could have used that money to become financially free in the next 12 months, how much is it costing me to put that money into those vehicles? And all I'm doing is I'm putting it there because someone told me it's a good idea. It was for my benefit. But once you get clear that your goal is now to be financially free as soon as possible, this is 24 months from now. We have people that are doing this in 36, 24, 18 months or less. Once they get really clear, they start putting all their efforts towards this. That the 401k is the biggest sham and the biggest hurdle to them getting to financial freedom, because access to cash is the number one hurdle from them being able to get their goals. And so it doesn't matter what the rate of return is. It doesn't matter what the match is or isn't. It doesn't matter any of those things. If it keeps me from my goal, it's costing me way too much.
Absolutely. One last question here, and that is, how did you grow your passive income from 2,500 a month to 50K per month? You gave us some idea, and land flipping had a portion of that, but that wasn't the whole story. So tell us.
Well, first and foremost, I'll say this. Russ and I decided that what you focus on will grow, but what you focus on and report on will grow exponentially. And that's a big lesson that applies to everyone who's listening to this right now. It's one thing to say, I want to become financially free. It's another thing to say, hey, there's X amount of people in my life that I'm going to literally report my progress to as I go. How much accountability does that create whenever you have to tell that person or those people in your life, I've made no movement in the last 3 months? You don't do very many of those months without feeling like I got to get going, right? And that's what we did. In 2019, Russ and I, we had been learning about passive income for 2 years. When we started our podcast in 2017, we started interviewing a lot of people and learning and being exposed to ideas. We started to figure out this whole investor DNA thing. And we said, wait a minute, why aren't we investing in all these things? Why aren't we taking action in these ways? And it was one of these times that I was taking my daughter to school. I have 5 daughters, by the way. But one of my daughters, I was taking her to school, and she was sitting in the back seat in her little car seat. She said, Dad, you gonna pick me up from school today? And I said, no, sweetheart, because I almost was kind of like, why would you even ask me? You know I'm not going to, because your mom is always the one that drops you off and picks you up because I'm at work. And I said, no, your mom is. She said, why are you not going to pick me up? And I was like, because I have to go to work, She's like, why you have to go to work? And I said, because I got to pay for the car. I got to pay for our house or the food that we eat, those things. She said, but we already have a house. We already have a car. And that's a very innocent conversation with, at the time, she was like 3 or 4. But that was one of those moments that sticks with me. It was an anchor moment that told me I have to create passive income because I told my daughter, there's no way for me to pick her up from school today because I have to go to work. And as you're listening to this, you have your own anchor moment that you've had to tell your kid, I can't come to this event that you have. It's very important to them. Or I can't take off to go to this, this out of town trip that your baseball team or your softball team is doing because I don't have the time off to even request from my job, whatever it may be. But that was what kind of lit the fire under me. I said, if we're not going to get serious about creating passive income, then we're not being true to our brand. We're not, this is something we have to do. We started reporting on that in 2020. And within 18 to 24 months, we had gone from 2,500 to over 50,000 a month. And it was because we started taking massive action, taking capital that we had access to and deploying it into the things that aligned with us as investors. And it was just like a hockey stick moment. Now, we continue to report on this every single month on our podcast. Once a month, at the end of the month, you can look for it. And I'm happy for you to come in there. We share all the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've made some mistakes. We've made some bonehead, investments along the way. But on the whole, because we focused on it and because we got really dialed in on reporting it, it made us that much more focused and committed. And I just think there's a lot of ways that you can do the same.
Well, a very rich and wonderful conversation. Joy, I can just hear the genuineness and the sincerity in your voice and your personality and everything you've shared with us today. It's been a delight and a pleasure having you.
Oh, man, anytime that I can get around people who are like-minded and share our story, it's a delight. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Enlightened investors, wait, don't go just yet. I just want to remind you about our recently launched webinar that you will not want to miss. If you're at all curious and would like to learn more about how real estate investing can diversify your investment portfolio, alleviate the anxiety associated with Wall Street swings, leverage your 401ks and IRAs to substantially increase the return on your investment, and do all of this with turnkey, hands-off passive real estate investments, then you'll want to immediately go to stevetalker.com/webinar. In the webinar, we'll also address the common dubious investment schemes that you want to avoid. To access the webinar, go to stevetalker.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you in the webinar.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.